John, thanks so much for joining me today on the Mark Divine Show. Super stoked to have you here, buddy.
It is good to be here, man.
Yeah, no, I got your book right here, and I was going through it last night. I really loved it, man. It's great work. Really, really cool to have that out there, and so well done. I would love to kind of get into it. I don't want to talk about the book right away and your philosophy of the warrior poet way, but I really want to just get into kind of your formative. The foundation of who John Lovell was. Like what was your origin story? Where did you grow up? What were your parents like? What were some of the big setbacks and breakthroughs that shaped you to even want to be, an Army Ranger and to become the man you are today? So let's start there.
Sure. So I grew up in the woods where all kids should grow up,
Yeah.
playing and building
Yeah.
forts, climbing
What
trees.
state,
And
by the way?
sorry,
What's
Georgia. Yeah.
Oh, you were in Georgia. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
that's right. Georgia. And so, growing up, I just was really interested in having fun like every little kid. Once high school hit, middle school hit, I was really more interested in being cool and accepted.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of its own pathway. Then later in high school, I found wrestling. And instead of it being all about, play and then being cool, then it was about winning.
Mm-hmm.
And I really found and fell in love with kind of combat, with fighting and the chess of violence and fighting. And so that was a different deviation. Then I went to
Before we
college.
go on, what
Yeah,
were
sure.
your parents like through all this? I mean, what were their forces? How did your mom shape you? How did your dad shape you? So I'm
Sure.
really fascinated about this whole idea of like foundational conditioning that comes from early childhood. It's like we're born like a just a piece of raw clay, and then we immediately start getting conditioned. And the parents have usually the biggest effect on that, unless you have some surrogate or you didn't have any parents. So I'm curious, like how do they shape the clay of John?
Sure. My dad was a businessman, still is, even in 75 years old, still working. The
Mm-hmm.
only thing I ever really saw him fail at in terms of vocational pursuit was retirement. He was terrible at retirement, went back to work and said, I'm going to keep working until I drop dead. And I think,
I
uh,
like that. I
if,
like that. Yeah,
yeah, you stop moving, you rust out, man. And
that's
so
right.
my dad was all about preparing me to work hard, keep my word, be able to focus in. But it was really more of the here, son, grow up fast so I can coach you to be a man. And
Okay.
so
Mm-hmm.
that was really, I will protect, I will provide, but I'm gonna coach you. And so it was
Mm,
more of a life coach father.
that's cool.
Mom was a kind of a classic nurturer. We went off to school for private schools and public schools, and then back to private schools. And then I went
Mm-hmm.
to a boarding school. I was such a troubled teen. I got booted out of my house at 15, and so that was an
Okay.
entirely different track. So, yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah, pretty much. So you're getting a little closer now. What was it that caused you to get booted out of your house, and what turned you around? Again, I'm looking for inflection points. Like one of the things that people gloss over often is like subtle moments that when you look back on it actually were major pivot points, right? So
Yeah,
you could gloss over getting booted out of the house. I could gloss over, some of the shit that happened in my senior year in high school where I rebelled against everything.
yeah,
And, I was lucky I didn't get killed in some of the crazy shit that I did. But, I don't talk about it much because it seems like, oh, so long ago. But it was a really pivotal moment in my life to wake up and say, wait a minute, if I keep going down this path, I might end up
right.
dead. You know what I mean? Not just maybe dead.
Man, I was a punk. I just lived kind of Epicurean style of like, give me no pain, give me all pleasure. Let me, I'm chasing skirts and,
Yeah.
bad substances I shouldn't have. And so, yeah, got in trouble with the law some and was hanging out with a bunch of friends that my parents would just say, these are the biggest bunch of losers going nowhere I've ever seen. And so they wanted a big cataclysmic shift. And I don't know that, like my dad specifically, he's like, I'm not really sure how to deal with this, but here, this is a mallet that will solve the problem. I'll send him off to boarding school. And so
Mhm.
that was the solution. And that's what I was forced to do. So,
Yeah. Actually, it's kind of funny because my two siblings, actually three siblings, were all sent to boarding school, and my mom kept me home because I was the good boy, which actually is why I rebelled. So it's interesting how you unpack these things. You're like, okay, there's a lot of psychological conditioning that happens in those years that stays with us, and I guess that's my point. It
right.
stays with you, and you're you're a warrior poet, and you know that emotional development is so crucial for men. And it's one of my missions to get men to open their eyes to that fact that, it doesn't make you weak to do emotional development. It actually makes you stronger.
I think
And then
that's
you
good.
start to understand how, how much you are living out the conditioning of your childhood when you do that work.
I think that's a good thought. I like that. I can
Yeah.
get behind it.
So wrestling, I was the opposite. Wrestling kind of scared me. I did it for like 6 months, and same thing with football. I just didn't find myself drawn to. Maybe it's because I was a taller kind of triathlete guy.
You probably didn't like the outfits.
Yeah, I didn't
Wrestling
like those
is,
outfits. I
bro,
just thought they were really corny. It's like, I'm not going to wear one of those outfits. I think that's right. I didn't even like the triathlon outfits. So
corny is such a euphemism. Thank you so much for saying that to us wrestlers. It was worse than corny. It was a different category.
it was.
Spandex bodysuits, just,
Yeah. Yeah.
nope.
Yeah. I wonder if do they change that at all? Or
Nope,
do people still
still
run that
rocking
route?
it. But if that's the cost of just getting out there and going toe to toe and
Yeah.
legally fighting another man for 6 minutes, I'm like, all right, I'll sign up for that. It was a good time. So
Yeah, yeah, it is incredible conditioning, and you have to face your fears quite a bit. It's like I know, there's quite a lot of rules in high school wrestling, but there's times probably where you thought you were going to get choked out, or you just were at the end of your rope, right?
yeah, and I mean, just I have found I hated losing. I
Uh
just
huh.
couldn't process. I couldn't stand it, and so man, I tortured myself just brutally. I never would have tried for something like special operations if I had not gone through just starving my body for
Hmm.
years and going toe to toe of just. I mean, after about 4 minutes, if you've been going hard, you are just done. You
You're just
can't
done,
sprint for 4 minutes and then you have to
right?
go two more. And then oftentimes, because my second year wrestling, I wasn't the best wrestler. I just hang in there for the first 4 minutes. And then it became kind of like a competition on who could dig deeper, who
Hmm.
had the biggest heart.
Hmm.
Who would just have that gritty, I will not quit. And
Hmm.
typically, I never found another man that would dig deeper and fight harder than me. And so, but every one of like, it was just,
Yeah,
that's where I was. Later, I got much better in technique. I didn't have to, you know,
yeah,
dip into those deep wells of misery to be able to come out on top. But it was definitely character shaping.
yeah. Well, and I love that. And character really is about self-awareness, and that just knowing, finding, and discovering like just how much you have to give, and then and then that hitting that wall and being able to give more. I mean,
Right.
I finally found that in crew, because rowing
Mm.
crew is a gut busting sport, just like the sprints, especially, just like wrestling. It's different kind of gut busting, but man, is that you just get to that place where you're like, I don't have another ounce to give, and then you just have to find it. And I always
That's right.
found it, and I ended up being one of the fittest guy probably at my college, because of that ability to just go there. And then when I got to buds, there was nothing that the instructors could do to me to hurt me. I don't know.
Yeah.
How did wrestling prepare you for ranger training?
Yeah, I mean, I discovered that I just hated losing, and I had a no quit part of me,
Yeah.
and so that was very revealing. And not only did I just discover that that was there, I cultivated it to make it much more. Because surely there was choice in there. Of I could have
Hmm.
just rolled over, accept the pin, and maybe no one would begrudge me for it, but I would have known. But I guess I uh, understood something. My dad also really helped me when I was a little boy playing soccer, and I write about
Hmm.
this in my book. But he would sit me down and really focus me. He'd make me close my eyes, and he would say focusing type words. So like, you
Nice.
are the fastest kid out there. No one can touch you. And so I learned focus early on. And then growing up, I was always working jobs, and really crappy jobs too. Like I
Hmm.
worked construction cleanup for 2 years.
Hmm.
Man, that's
I
a
did that.
crappy job.
It's a crappy job. Yeah.
And I worked really, really hard all the time. And so I don't know, that early do not quit character development, the ability to suffer and to suffer well. That was really some of the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah, but what you just said about your dad, I want to kind of double click on that, because internal dialogue is so key for people, right? So that, you see the guys who quit Ranger School or buds. One of the things that they got going on wrong is they're just talking to themselves.
Yeah.
poorly. They've
Yeah.
got some negative dialogue. They've got some can't, won't, couldn't, shouldn't, whatever. But it sounds like your father taught you how to have a positive internal dialogue and actually gave you kind of some mantras, or maybe it just you just thought it was a belief system, like, oh yeah, I am good, I am fast, but he probably gave you some internal dialogue so that when times got tough, you could lean on that. Am
He
I right?
did. He did for sure. That self-speaking,
Hmm.
I think it's so big. My wife and I are currently watching the Alone TV series. Have you seen this?
I have not. I'll have to check that out. Tell
Pretty
me about it.
good, but the premise is they drop a bunch of contestants off. They're all alone,
Oh yeah.
but you can tell who's about to quit because that self-talk starts getting negative and
Right.
they're justifying, and then they make it of like, oh, I'm not really after the prize money. I've been on this journey and the journey's over now. And
Right.
it's
Right.
all that stuff, but you
I
can
hear that in
start
our
to,
SEAL fit all the time.
yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
got
it.
what I wanted out of this. I'm going to leave now.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
really?
it.
Okay. Yeah, internal dialogue is key. What's amazing, sometimes, again, to the reason I like to double click on those, because I'm a trainer at heart, as you are, and so I want to make sure that listeners understand just how important self talk is. And if you grew up in an environment like I did, I had to curate my own self talk because my father was not like
Mm,
your father. The two are like cut from a completely different cloth. I really respect him for what he did give me, which was this body basically,
yeah,
and a lot of hard work. But the dialogue and the beating and the alcohol, I could have done without.
right.
So I had to learn that myself, and it literally changed my life. So if you're listening to this and you're like, and you have a father like John's who does, and a mom who gave you that positive self talk, you develop yourself, good on you. But I don't. I reckon probably more than 60 or 70% of the population does not have that, and
Yeah.
then you're just getting flooded with all this negative stuff through news and all the cultural stuff, which I want to get into later. So I always say, just turn that shit off and start talking nicely to yourself. It makes a massive difference in your life.
I had two different wrestling coaches because I switched schools. One of the wrestling coaches, gritty, no nonsense, practical, really tough. He was a winner. He was a
Mm-hmm.
winner. And it showed and it just kind of eased out. An incredibly masculine guy. I think he was probably 4'5", Not really, but man, he was as wide as he was tall with just cauliflowered out
Right.
ears. And he left a really indelible mark on me. My junior year, I would be at a boarding school and I had our like psychology philosophers. He taught some type of humanity and he would become my wrestling coach. And
Mm-hmm.
he didn't have that drive. He didn't have that grit. And really of like it was an entirely different thing under poor leadership. I didn't
Interesting.
do well. I actually ended up losing my love for wrestling under
Really?
that.
Yeah. Just that's
He
the
was not a
impact of a
winner.
bad
He
leader.
wasn't. He wasn't a winner like my
Right.
previous coach. Anyway, just
That's
thoughts.
fascinating. Yeah. No. And that's another really good point. It's like if you are in a relationship where someone has a big influence over you, whether it's a coach, parent, or it's tough to change your parents, but a coach or a boss, and they're negative, then you have to know that it's going to affect you.
Yeah,
You're going to get, stained by that unless you've developed the capacity to radically protect yourself from someone else's negative thinking and energy and, kind of toxic, whatever, even if it's toxic positivity.
it's tough. It's
It
tough,
is.
man.
It can be done, but it's tough work. Requires daily discipline of mental development, which is kind of what we teach at Unbeatable Mind. So what led you into the Army? Like, what was
So
that all
I
about?
ended up going into college first.
Hmm.
I majored in fraternity. I was the guy like,
I did that too. That's great.
like drunk Tuesday afternoon. Like
Yeah, yeah.
nobody's drunk at this time. This
It
guy
seemed perfectly
was.
normal at the time, didn't it?
Man, I just a punk. After I was extending adolescence
Right.
indefinitely. Somewhere amidst my very first year of college, partying it up, I just felt somehow like a light switch coming on that I wanted to do something different. I wanted to go do, door kicking,
Hmm.
fast rappelling, jump out of plane. I wanted to do the special operations thing.
Hmm.
And, of Rangers don't have very good PR.
Not
We
compared to the
don't,
SEALs, at least.
we don't
SEALs
go for
don't have PR. In fact, we are our own PR, much to the chagrin of SOCOM. Yeah.
we don't chase after those book deals as a SEAL has me on to talk about my book. Oh, the irony. I
The
can't
irony. I
take
know.
the irony. It's so, so good. So anyway, I was planning on SEALs and after I quit college, I started just literally getting back the party kid was put aside, and I reinvigorated the wrestler John, and I started just torturing myself in
Hmm.
preparation. I was going to do the SEAL thing because I
Hmm.
knew SEALs. I'm like, yay for SEALs. And I did cold water training every
Hmm.
day, and just,
Right.
holding my breath underwater and see how long I could do that. And then just brutally torturing and all the exercise methods that I could. And I developed such a disdain for cold water. When I learned what Army Rangers were, I'm like, wait, I can do similar stuff without the cold water. Funny enough, ironically enough, my very first week in Ranger Battalion, I'd get hypothermia from cold water.
I
But
know a lot of people hype out in Ranger School. It was just kind of the irony there. That's
and this
funny.
was Ranger Battalion, not
Oh,
Ranger
battalion.
School.
Got it.
So anyway,
That's awesome.
fun times. I ended up quitting college because I could have rattled off a whole list of things of like, man, patriotism and GI Bill and belong to something greater than myself. I had a whole rap sheet. But Anyway, I think really it was just I was careening toward a divine appointment.
Hmm.
And so anyway, that'd be kind of
You
my
tell that
next.
story in your book. I don't know exactly whether it was boot camp or where you were, but how you did find that divine appointment. You met your friend who was a deeply religious guy, and then you kind of had this awakening or this shift
Yeah,
toward a more
it
pious life.
is. I tiptoe a little bit. Not that it's just really hard to explain what happened to me. It was
Yeah,
not basic training. It was before. It was the in processing. Do you guys have that
yeah.
for the Navy?
Enlisted guys do. For us officers, it's all done through the officer accession program, so sort of similar.
Got it. Well, we're just shaved heads and we're
Yeah,
waiting in line for dog tags and
yeah.
it's downtime. It's just all right. I'm waiting for my uniform now. Now I get a haircut. Now they're
Hmm.
gonna put a bunch of mystery needles in my arm.
Hmm.
And so it was that time, the easiest time.
Right.
And man, I did have that religious friend, Kevin, um, but he wasn't like the push it on you
He
kind
wasn't.
of guy.
Yeah, it wasn't proselytizing, born again type.
Well,
Uh,
it's not that he would have shied away from that. It's just that this guy was the real deal. I've been around a lot of, folks who've like, oh, Christian, whatever. And, they'd have to tell you because you would not guess it.
yeah.
This guy's whole spirit and demeanor struck me different.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
this guy had something real that I didn't have. And it kind of ended there. And then we split our separate ways and he went to his own basic training and I went to mine and we didn't really connect again. But Anyway, I experienced a radical conversion to saving faith in Jesus.
That's
No
amazing. Yeah.
no chapel or nothing like that. Just literally, I'm telling you, around May 20th of 2001, I was one way, and then I was completely different. And so yeah,
How
that's
do you account for that? I mean, there's so many stories like that. Like you.
I have to just looking back because I've tried to even look through it in analytical, naturalistic, kind of
Right.
humanistic
Hmm.
means of like, was I at some crisis? Like, man, I'd moved out at 15. Of like, I wasn't scared. I wasn't feeling like this was a hard time. I was excited about what I was doing. There seemed to be no real psychological answer for what was happening. What I think happened is an actually true encounter with the very real God that is there.
Yeah.
That's what I think it is. I think it is actually truly a spiritual force where I met Jesus, the God man. That's what I think.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I could say it in a different way, but I think that's acceptable. Right. The presence then affected your psychology or your makeup so much that it just shifted everything and
Yeah,
aligned with it and
yeah.
aligned with it.
Best way I could describe it, I had a different heart, literally
Yeah.
a different heart. It wasn't, I had positive self,
Right.
thinking at that point. It wasn't the same as I'll
It's not
speak
it's not a
encouraging.
it's not a thought thing. It's just a felt thing and
Yeah.
knowingness, and it comes from the heart, which is the seat of our soul. So that's such a cool story.
It's that spot
Yeah,
that just
right there.
got recalibrated in a way that never happened and never did again. So,
Yeah, I love that. Well, I'm sure that then that shift really affected how you were as a leader and as an individual. And so, tell us about just Ranger School. What did you learn? What were some of the interesting things there? And then summarize your kind of career as a Ranger. What was
sure.
that like? Because people are really fascinated. They want to know what SEALs and Rangers and Green Beanies do, and some of the cool things you did. and what you've
Sure.
learned, and how it could help them.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, I didn't go straight to Ranger School.
Okay.
Before they send you to Ranger School, you got to get to Ranger Battalion. That's where you really do your job. Think of that like a law firm, and Ranger School is like passing the bar,
Got it.
And
Yep.
so
Yep.
oftentimes guys will go off to Ranger School and become like just one of my best buddies in Ranger School was a SEAL, Keith, and
That's awesome.
we were always battle buddies together, and we laughed together, and embraced the suck together. He's a buddy, and so anyway, I had to spend a year at Range Battalion first, and really, you're just it my leader specifically tried to make my life a living hell.
Hmm.
He got buyer's remorse. He picked me out of a lineup of young skin-headed Rangers, and he wanted the best Ranger he could get. And so here's this big lineup of Rangers, and he's looking at all our scores, and just basically your packet that follows you around. And I seem to be the best win, of like I'm crushing everything they threw at me. Of like I'm combatives champ and Ranger indoctrination program, and I'm annihilating my PT scores. And
Right.
anyway, he's like, I'll take this one. He talked like that. He talked like Satan incarnate.
That's
But
awesome.
anyway, and I no harm, no foul. But then he got buyer's remorse when he found out that I was a Christian, because he thought I would be a conscientious objector. And so
Oh,
immediately wanted to make my life miserable. So I'd quit, and he had a perception of just like training up this T-2000 robot kind of Ranger where he could turn him around and like, all right, destroy. And I wasn't that. And so he really made my life very, very awful and miserable in hazing and terrible ways. So
that's funny.
after that, I'd go to Ranger School. You get back after going through that suck fest, and now you've proved yourself, and you can start gaining rank. And I would gain rank very, very fastly.
Can you pause and just tell us about Ranger School? I didn't get a chance to go to Ranger School, so I'm kind of curious. I mean, I
Man,
generally know what it's like, but the 75 days of just rucking around, right? Doing little missions. I mean, what's
yeah, that's a
help
good
me out.
thing. Of like you did buds, it's just
Right.
all the mental games and things they do to hurt you. It's all
Right.
just repackaged differently.
Right.
Instead of us playing in, little shorts with big logs in the surf and sand and cold water, we're
Right.
just doing night missions and in the woods with night vision that doesn't work at all.
Right.
And just walking on bloody feet and emaciated and sleep deprived. And it's a different repackaging of the same suck.
Right.
All the tactics were really more antiquated Vietnam kind of stuff, which
Mm-hmm.
some of those principles still hold true
Mm-hmm.
whenever you're in jungle-ish or wooded or mountainous terrain. However, really, Ranger School, I came out tactically worse at my job than
Hmm.
I was when I went there. Really, and seriously, of like the Ranger instructors, a lot of them didn't even come from Ranger Battalion.
Is that
And
right?
and if somebody gets the Ranger tab, that's not like the full like blooded. That's not the real Ranger Battalion. That's where that's day in, day out of learning how to kick in doors and seize
Yeah.
airfields and do all the things Rangers do. Ranger School is a 60-day suck fest rite of passage where you learn a lot about personal limits and leadership.
Yeah.
And
I had
that's
to
it.
learn that the hard way. I think what you just said is important for people to know if they're interested in the military is that, like you don't find people going through SEAL, through buds who aren't going to be SEALs.
Yeah.
They don't allow it.
Yeah.
But I remember, I was, early in my career, bouncing around when I was there early enough to be around the first few years of SOCOM. And a lot of senior Army officers are wearing this Ranger tab. And I'm thinking to myself, they don't look like Rangers.
Yeah.
And someone had to school me and said, you know what? He's not a Ranger.
Yeah.
He
That's
just
right.
went to Ranger
Correct.
school.
Completely different. I've seen a lot of jacked up dudes with tabs.
Yeah.
And so, we do have a rite of passage to like a big, bulwark guarding who gets into Ranger Battalion, and that's
Yeah.
Ranger Assessment and Selection Program, RASP. When I went
RASP.
through, it was called RIP, and now I'll do the
Remember
old
Rip.
curmudgeon
Yeah.
thing where I'll be like, back when it was hard, it was harder though. Truly, it was RIP, Ranger Indoctrination Program, and then that basic training was very easy for me.
Okay.
And the AIT, and then airborne school. Man, if we
Mhm.
ran any slower in airborne school, we'd be backing up. I
I
just,
did that airborne school. It was before,
oh,
first when the SEALs first started, they did their own. They basically would take you up day one and throw you out with a free fall chute on. That was back in the '60s and '70s,
I love
and then
that
they
method.
started sending us to the 3 weeks of airborne ranger school. And we used to say, man, they packed about 3 days of training into 3 weeks.
It awful of like,
It
man,
was awful. Yeah,
I almost quit airborne school because if somebody chanted the word airborne to me one more time, I was just going to,
beat your boots.
yeah, I'm just like, I'm done. I can't handle it. I'm mentally tapping it. No, not truly. That's a tongue in cheek story. But the whole
Right,
point is nothing was hard about it except the fact that it was all so stupid. It was
right.
just so maddeningly stupid. And there was a lesson in that where I had to learn some mental resiliency that's important for doing life in general. Of some stuff stupid, and you just got to be tough enough to endure it. And
That's right.
but Ranger, of though those easier rites of passage, those were really easy. Once I got to RIP, that was not that
That
wasn't
was tough.
funny anymore. That
Yeah.
that was awful. That was awful time for me. And that guarded the door so that you could get into Ranger Battalion where the suck really started to happen.
It almost sounds like RIP is more like buds, but it's shorter. How long is RIP? Is it
No, it was like 4 weeks. I don't know
4 weeks?
what it's at now, but no, it wouldn't be as intense as something like Buds were, especially your
Mhm,
Hell Week.
mhm,
Nothing in there would have been nearly that bad, but maybe on the easier weeks,
mhm. Yeah,
it would have been something akin to that,
yeah.
maybe. So anyway, there you
What
go.
what were some I wanna try to get into the warrior poet way because it's so fascinating, but, just to kind of pin the ranger experience, what were some of your biggest lessons, either leadership or life or big ahas that you got from being a ranger?
Yeah, sure. So, when I became a young sergeant, and I wasn't in for ages, I did a short time, moved on, and did a whole bunch of other stuff that balances me out and really would lead to warrior poet.
Mhm,
But what I learned is I gained rank very quickly, um, and I was trying to motivate troops and be a good leader. Now, first off, I was just doing how I was led, which is if anybody, you put the fear of God in them,
mhm.
and if things don't go exactly your way, you punish young privates. You look disapprovingly at your spec fours, and and
Right,
maybe you'll give them the respect of a private thrashing.
right.
And then your younger non-coms and all the way up. It's more of professional respect, of closed doors were first name basis and doing all that stuff. It's that. Um, but I wanted to learn how to be a good leader. And I found that yelling at everyone wasn't the turnkey solution to leading
Mhm,
soldiers well. I
mhm,
remember a guy named Zach, who was a former SWAT cop, and then he came in and he was just so ridiculously hard on him. If I was to add any, difficulty to that, which I could have done as his leader, it just would have annihilated him. He didn't need that. He was
yeah,
a self correcting dude. He needed clear left and right limits. Don't micromanage him, empower him, spin this guy up and let him go. He's self motivated. Then I had another dude named Cassidy, and this guy, there's nothing I could do to fix this guy. Of like, I did everything. It was my biggest leadership failure. And man, that was really challenging because
mhm,
he was probably my only real leadership challenge where I'm like, I could not make that kid a ranger. I
mm,
tried. I
mhm,
couldn't do it. It just didn't have what it took.
mm,
Most of the other ones, though, I found some type of feng shui where you would adapt your leadership model to the person.
yeah,
And I found that yelling at guys wasn't the best way always. Some guys actually need that, or they
mhm,
just need it in little spurts at little times. So
mhm,
I need to be able to, like, I see a bunch of tumblers and locks around here, and I got to know how to open each one of them real quick so I can get good results, motivation, and I want to grow the person, not just get what I want in that moment.
mhm,
My guys, though, did come to love me.
mhm.
And that was a real cool thing where it's not that they would wait for my orders, it's that they would try to anticipate my orders.
Yeah,
And that was a different thing that I didn't really see to my left and right. And so once I saw that, I was fascinated. I'm like, wow, leadership is such an easier thing when they want you to win.
mhm.
Um,
That's
and
right.
they care about you. And they knew, no, I'm looking out for you and I care about you. You take care of the boys and they'll take care of you.
Yeah,
Um, in the
well said.
military context, I won't necessarily say that about the civilian. I learned something different in the civilian world.
Yeah, well, that's a whole. I found that out too when I left SEALs. I was like, "Holy shit!" It's much harder to lead in a civilian, especially business environment, because you don't have all the systems and culture of the special ops community that has already prepped the field for you, so to speak, as a leader. You know, you're dealing with all sorts of different cats and dogs. You don't have the systems of selection and acculturation
Yeah.
that happen, and you don't have the rules and regs that are kind of quietly holding people in check and in line. I think
You
leading in the military is way easier than in the civilian world.
I think in some respects, you're absolutely right. What bothered me is when I got out and started working jobs and, trying to climb that ladder and do
Hmm.
all the right stuff. Leaders would take kind of military vernacular or team, language, and they would speak that. And I had
Hmm.
the understanding of like, okay, I'll take care of you, and then you'll take care of me. If I take care of the business will take care of me. I'm like, well, no, it's not like a mission where we're all trying to make it out alive and accomplish the mission. It's
Hmm.
no, let's all make as much money as possible. And the company makes a lot of
Right.
money, and they'd make even more if they pay me less. And I would just shut up and
Right.
produce without and then all the employees to your left and right, it's no, they just want to maximize profit oftentimes. I'm not saying that of
Right.
everyone, but it meant that our objective isn't necessarily truly tied together, though we'll give lip service
Hmm.
to take that mountain together. Really, I found secretly most folks were just in it for themselves.
Yeah.
And that was confusing. And I felt stupid. Like, oh, I was out here doing the whole team thing. I'm the only one. I'm the only one doing the team thing. No one else is doing. Great. Great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've been there. It is solvable, but it takes a long time, and you have to have the right people who are, really into that. It's something we're trying to crack the code on with our corporate work, but it's not easy. So tell me about this missionary work that you did, and then what let's segue from there into your warrior poet work. Like, this is rounding out kind of the character of John, and so I want to know kind of what the missionary work and the softening of the heart and what led you to become a warrior poet in your own words and to write this
Yeah.
book.
So military was a stop along my way as the best time I never want to do again. Loved it. I ended up going back to college. I got a degree over a long period of time. So I did complete that mission. But it was while I was working jobs, and then I ended up going into business and stuff, and that went very well. But I got married along the way.
Hmm.
And my wife and I had always had our desire to be able to go be foreign missionaries somewhere.
Hmm. That's pretty
And
cool.
so that had just been on our plan of like, wouldn't it be real cool to go like live abroad and serve the Lord, like, for like a year?
Hmm.
And we thought, yeah, that'll be cool. And so all of a sudden, an opportunity came across our bow, and was like, we found that we could actually do it. And it was insanity, but we're like, yeah, let's do this. This will be fun. And so we did it. But then we ended up staying for 4 years.
What
So
was the organization and the situation and
sure,
what were the
it was a
highlights?
parachurch organization that really traditionally goes through sports ministry.
Mm.
However, we were kind of like we were an anomaly within it. What we did is we had like this house abroad in Central America, and 30 college age students would live there. I'd lived there too as their kind of in-house Bible teacher.
Oh
And then there
wow.
was another missionary couple there as well. And our job is to take these college students, train them up for 9 months with a Christian worldview and Bible training. We'd also engage in missions, and we planted a church. And so we were doing all of that stuff abroad. And so really, really cool thing. For my part, that's where I really learned to be a teacher.
Hmm.
I was
Hmm.
teaching in the military, obviously. However, I really made teaching a science and became far, far better at oral communication, studying that, and to be able to turn on charisma and
Hmm.
really own an audience.
Hmm.
And so that was a really, really important thing for me. I also devoted myself to study. I fell in love with reading. And so, man, old, dusty theological works,
Mm.
I'd unearthed from the 1800s, and I would read the stuff cover to cover. And
Hmm.
so I would literally have some study days where this would be 13 hours. I would forget to eat. I would be so engrossed in studying church history or Christian worldview and apologetics, of all the soteriology and hermeneutics and homiletic,
Hmm.
whatever, all the kind of things, and a bunch of other subjects as well. But I fell in love with reading, and for years I just devoted myself to study. And so
Hmm.
that was kind of the scholarly impulse, the philosopher and the poet being born, doing a
Hmm.
great and selfless work abroad.
That's awesome. I talk a lot about life purpose in the context of archetypal energy,
Mhm.
and how, like, those of us drawn into, especially the special ops, we have a very strong warrior archetype in us, obviously, or else we
Yeah.
wouldn't be drawn to that. But as well as I do, there's some guys in there who just want to play whack-a-mole, and they're not true warriors in the way that
Yeah.
you and I would define the term. But if you're really following your purpose, then you can't not do that, right? But then as you evolve, if you're a self-evolutionary individual like you are, then that warrior archetype will start to open up to be inclusive of other archetypes, and very common
Yeah.
other archetypes that go with the warrior archetype are the leader, the scholar, the philosopher,
Right.
and the monk, and the
Yeah.
poet, right?
That the
So
poet. Yeah.
so mine didn't include the poet, but it included the leader, the scholar, and teacher. So I think it's really cool. We have a lot in common in that regard, and that whole archetypal energy or impulse, right, it comes from that heart center
Right.
that we talked about earlier.
Well, like you and like most of our brothers in arms, we wax far more lion than lamb, or
Right.
far easier to get in touch with that warrior archetype. What I found is the whole poet aspect really sucked. Still to this day, I mean, it's something I work on,
Hmm.
because I think it's important. The warrior is able to defend a family well. He's not actually able to keep one together very well. The
Interesting.
warrior is good at winning at
That's
war.
right.
They're bad at thriving in peace. I know too many buddies, and so do you,
Hmm.
uh, that were very successful at war just to come back and suck at life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so what I find is the poet has a massive amount to teach, and we've got to be balanced men.
Hmm.
And so you don't treat a wife and kids the exact same way you treat dudes,
Right.
especially in a high stakes environment. And so I had to really grow in that. And still to this day, when I'm off, kind of like a grumpy John about something, or I'm off and I'll feel, no, I'm fine. My wife knows when I'm off like 2 days before I even recognize it. And then she's like, well, what's going on with you? And I
Right.
just feel like a moron still to this day, because I'm like, all right, I know something. I can still feel my feelings. I don't know what they're telling me. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it takes me a while to kind of unpack. I don't have a high regard of introspective emotional intelligence. And I wish I did, because my
Hmm.
wife, when something's off with her, she usually knows exactly what it is right away. I'll feel
Hmm.
like, no, that's not bothering me. And it comes to find out 3 days later, I'm like, oh, no, no, that really is bothering me.
Hmm.
And I felt fine. I didn't feel affected. But the body keeps the score, and that was affecting me. And so, still to this day, it's a challenge.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's not easy for guys to do that, or to find that kind of emotional self-awareness. I think it's findable, through deep practice of introspection and a lot of therapy. But we're so conditioned that, at our stage of development as a culture, and where we've been, men are so conditioned, for that all action all the time, right?
Yeah.
Bias toward winning, that it's hard to even understand, like, what you just said. Most people would be like, I don't even know what he's talking about.
Right. And I think most folks listening into your podcast, absolutely. And then if we get
Yeah.
outside of you and I, our little worlds, into like the mainstream
Yeah.
culture, that's the only language they speak. They don't
That's
have a
right.
warrior archetype at all. And
Right.
that's really, really awful. Of like,
That's right.
they're here, you and I are in a race to the top. Let's be winners, and let's study what that is, and let's have grit and intelligence so that we can tactfully come about and find the top of that pyramid. Let's
Hmm.
climb that ladder
Hmm.
quickly. And the rest of the United States seems to be in a race to the bottom. Let's become weak losers, victims,
Yeah.
making everyone else be accountable for our real problems.
Yeah.
And it's a race to the bottom. And so
Well, I agree with the race to the bottom, but I don't agree that it's the rest of the United States. I think it's a very, very small, deliberate, highly organized and intelligent cabal
Hmm.
who's trying to push America to the bottom through
I
divisiveness
yeah,
and through the media. But these individuals control the media. I mean, look at the freaking media. It's just awful.
yeah,
It should be outlawed, right? Take it all off the table and let everyone find their own news because it's awful
yeah.
what they're feeding people. And it's total bullshit. And I know you talk about that toward the end of your book about, just
Mhm.
not trusting the news. And this is one of my first teachings is declutter and turn off the TV because
That's
it's
great.
crap.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just all propaganda and all negative. But
yeah,
I think there's a lot of good people out there. They're just being fed lies and bullshit
yeah.
and negativity.
I don't know what the numbers are. I like to think on my better days, I think, no, 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 we're the silent, overwhelming majority.
I would hope so, but
And then we have some big election, and it's kind of like,
I know.
well, is that real? Is there really that many blue hairs voting for crazy insanity?
I
Stuff.
know. I know. I know.
I
I
don't
could be
know,
wrong.
but I get some hope of like here. There's the Bud Light boycott that had
Yeah,
some teeth. The
it
Target
did.
boycott that had some teeth, and I'm like, ooh, I feel like we're shit. I can feel our numbers now, and that feels good. But what I see is when I made allusion to that the rest of the world, it maybe it'd be better stated of all of our institutions of power, because perhaps the majority of the population is with us for just decent sanity, but our institutions of power
Agree with that.
in all the different sectors, they're calling the shots, and
They
there's the
seem
race to the bottom.
they
And
seem to have been co-opted at a minimum,
yeah,
and conditioned or mass formationed into believing a certain one way is the only way, and it's very dangerous. I agree with you. We're in for some interesting times in the next few years. I'm going to be fascinated to see what happens with this election next year. By the
yeah,
way, because I don't see this current government, having any desire to leave office. Not that anyone does, but like
yeah.
this is why they want Trump so badly. I think so that they
Mm.
can, recreate what happened in 2020, and then slam the doors shut.
I want to voice no new conspiracy theories
Yeah,
because that might come true.
I
All
know.
our
Okay,
conspiracy theories are coming
I'm
true.
gonna take that to heart, and
So
I will shut
don't
my lips.
say
I'm not going to
anything.
say anything more. let's
Man, I
let's
don't know what's
together make
going
sure
on.
that doesn't happen. All right, let's
Yeah,
make sure.
really.
So, how would you define what a warrior poet is? Is that the yin yang, the masculine and feminine working together in harmony? Or what's that look
No,
like?
not so much. This is warrior poet. It's very, very broad. It's someone who lives for higher purpose and who is ready to sacrifice in the defense of others. It's someone who recognizes that you should be fully lover and a fighter. You should
Yeah.
be fully lion and fully a lamb. You should be both. And to be deficient in either one is a deficiency in both, because a real warrior protects, a real
Yes.
warrior loves, right? And a
Right.
real lover wants to protect as well. Like a real
Hmm.
lover protects.
Hmm.
And so they flow into each other, and it is requirement to balance out a person. Yin yang, I don't like quite as much in that, there's some Eastern philosophy there that I find a little bit logically untenable. I don't know where you're landing, but how you define it. But anyway, the rabbit trail. All right, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I won't go down there. I would just say that yin yang is just balance.
Got it. Okay. Well,
That's
I
all. That's
really
all I
like.
describe it as balance. And the reason, if you really understand the true imagery or the metaphor behind it, like in the black and the white, right? In the black section, there's a white dot. In the white section, there's a black dot.
Right.
And that's what you just described,
I
right? So
love that. Yeah.
if someone is action, they're still a lover, and if someone is all lover, they're still prone toward action. So and then the idea is to ride the line between the two, always in balance, like a razor's edge.
I see.
You're always moving from one side to the other. There's no perfect balance, but you're always aware if you're in the action fucking warrior mode, that you're not too far from the lover
Yeah.
mode, right?
I really like that, and I'll definitely
Yeah.
definitely say that. I think a real man is successful based off two things. One is what priorities does he set for his life? And the
Right.
second is how well does he balance between those priorities?
Yeah, I love that. You make a comment that, and you have a chapter in your book that you need to face death before you die, which I agree with. Now, talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, if it is difficult to know how to do life until you've really faced death.
Hmm.
And so I've had many brushes with death, some almost dead moments. I'm sure you've had
Hmm.
quite a few, but when those happen, you find your heart, in your throat. And as the adrenaline passes, you know exactly what you want to do when you get
Hmm.
home and when you get safe.
Hmm.
You're going to ask that girl out. You're going to marry her. You're going to
Hmm.
buy a little house on that little spot of land. You're going to pull the trigger on that. You're going to go into business. You're going to get out of the military. You're going to do such and such. You start making plans and dreams. You see the faces of the people that actually matter the most to you. And
Hmm.
so I'm not saying, hey, everybody should go bungee jumping with in a real shady spot with a spotty rubber band. Like I'm not. Don't try to make that happen
Been there, but done
necessarily.
that, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So anyway, but I'm just saying, someone who has faced their own demise really can look at life with an increased vitality and know exactly what's worth living for. All the stuff that's right now crowding in with the tyranny of the urgent, all the things
Hmm.
that you think are really important. If you found today was your last day, you would immediately be able to declutter all of that stuff and you would know the one, two, three things, the
Yeah.
only stuff that really matters. And so by facing your own death, and I really go deep into it in the chapter in a way that right here, people listening in are like, okay, good for you, John. What do I do? I'm like, well, get the book, bro.
Hmm.
And so right there, it really kind of unpacks in a practical way how they can go about doing that.
Yeah.
And so, and why the exercise is essential.
Right. I think it's essential too, and it's something that I totally agree with. You really have to, it's kind of like Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind. Why not do that with
Yeah.
your life? So
Right.
really understand what's going to be important when you're in your last few months. And the research been done is kind of what you said. People at the end of their life are like, gosh, they don't say I wish I had more money or I wish I'd built more businesses or I wish I'd done more crazy things. It's
Yeah.
always, I wish I had been a better communicator. I had more time to spend with my family, you
Yeah.
know, done something more meaningful.
Yeah. That's it, man.
And that kind of ties into this idea of goodness, not greatness. Again, part of our weird culture right now is is the glorification of the ego, right? Everyone trying to be the best, the fastest, climb more mountains and run more marathons in every continent than anyone else. And I do countless podcasts with these people, and their stories are really interesting. But I'm always saying, like, what are you trying to prove?
Yeah.
Are you trying to prove your own greatness to the world? And so your idea of goodness, not greatness, has really kind of resonated with me. We've talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I get why the greatness aspect is attractive.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people really chasing after that. For my part, greatness of like, yeah, I'll make a lot of habits today. I'll play a smart game and I'll work real hard, and maybe one day someone will call me great. And if they don't, I don't really give a crap.
Right.
That's not where the big stuff that matters the most in my life is. Returning again to the end in mind of like, I won't care whether they've erected a statue of me in my local, town square. What
Hmm.
I'll care about is that I am dying with unfinished business,
Yep.
healed relationships, and there are, of I've made an impact in real people's lives in front of me. I
Hmm.
didn't live the life that culture would look up to and celebrate and want to boost me on their shoulders for. Of like, no, no, no. I lived for a greater purpose other than myself and my own accolades, and it made a difference.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so important, is to redefine, success in terms of what's going to give you that peace of mind to know that you have zero regrets and that
I've been,
everything's okay.
I've been very, very poor, and I've been very blessed in my life. And I'll say, earthly riches are filled with all kinds of poverty. That's
That's right.
Church Father Augustine. That's not mine. I wouldn't be smart enough to come up with that. But
No,
truly,
that's
some of the
great
most
though.
miserable people I know are very wealthy
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Also, some of the most miserable people I know are extremely poor people. And
Mhm.
so you can be miserable either way. I'm just saying
Mhm.
the metrics for success are so off kilter
Mhm.
that that it's difficult to shake anyone awake
Mhm.
today and talk to them about the things that matter most. And they may get lip service to it, but then as soon as you were able to speak that truth of like, no, 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 it's about taking care of that bride from your youth and pursuing her like you're dating to foster a long, healthy marriage that keeps growing.
Nice.
That's crazy hard.
That
No
is hard.
one's doing that. You want to stand out and be great? Have a great marriage.
Yeah,
And you can only have a great marriage by being a good man. You can't do it any other. It's impossible. You can't do it any other way.
that's
And so
true.
give me goodness. Goodness gives fulfillment. Giveness makes a forever mark on lives around. Goodness means I could be ready to die with a smile on my lips and a song in my heart.
Yeah, I love that. That's great, John. I just have a couple more questions. I gotta let you go, but so you teach firearms. What's the number one thing that someone needs to know how to do with a firearm? Like if someone's listening saying, I don't really know how to use a firearm, and you said, well, I could teach you this one thing or these two things, and I could do it in an hour or a day at a minimum, and they're going to
Yeah.
be effective. Is it possible to teach someone that?
Yeah, man, I can usually oftentimes in 5-10 minutes put somebody farther ahead than they've been able to make progress on their own in a few years.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah. As a good coach, I can go straight to it. Now, each person's a little bit different, but
Right.
especially when you're starting off, you know where that starting line is. Before anyone is ever able to come to me, they've got to watch my YouTube video on universal firearm safety rules. I'm like, go
Okay.
check out the 4 universal firearm safety rules. And then after you've watched that and you've got that, now we're good to go. I'll also want them to learn some knowledge of like, all right, how do you pick it up properly? How do you rack that slide? How do you load? How do you unload? I
Hmm.
would prefer they would already do that so that
Hmm.
I could spend just a couple minutes showing here's your grip, here's your platform, how to build a good base. And then here is how you line up sights. Good. But where I really want to get as fast as I can at is to how you press the trigger
Hmm.
and to not anticipate the shot.
Yeah.
The anticipation of the shot is why every right-handed shooter is shooting down and left. It's why
Hmm.
you're missing really, really badly. And so
Hmm.
to build some initial fundamentals, I need to get you to stop anticipating the shot. And I have my own little feng shui way where I can really quickly do that with someone. But that's something that's very hard for them to overcome on their own. And I've got my own little science for overcoming it.
That's cool. And you run seminars like that
Yeah, we
down in
run
Georgia?
pistol and rifle classes. We teach some one-man room clearing stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mark, you're a room clearing expert
Hmm.
from back in the day. You would hate some of this because it goes against what we learned how to do in teams. But when
Yeah.
you're alone, you're responsible for all work 360 every
Well,
moment.
also, if you're alone, you're usually in the house, aren't you? Are you talking about if you're in the house and an intruder comes in, or if you're going in a house?
So, if a civilian ever gets in a gunfight, it will be in and around structures. Whether
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
fighting your way out of a workplace under siege, or there's an
Right.
active killer event, whether you're going
Right.
to or away, whether you pulled up on your house, there's a strange vehicle in the driveway, and your front door's kicked open. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
now it's a room.
Yeah.
Now I'm clearing out. For actual home defense, I would rather someone have a better home defense plan so they wouldn't have to clear the
Yeah.
house.
Yeah.
Instead,
Right.
I'm going to wait in a dark corner, and you're going to just walk in front of my sights, and then you'll be
Right.
talking to Jesus, and you'll be really confused, and he'll be like, "Hey, John
He
used
wins.
better
Yeah.
use of angles and real space and time."
Right. That's awesome. All right. So you're a homesteader, and I always think of like, you know, Yellowstone movie when I think of like homesteading, like going out and just like finding your piece of land and building a house. What I think you mean is your whole family. You're just raising your family on this land, and you're trying to be as sustainable as possible, and not have to rely on government for
Yeah.
anything that you don't have to rely on. Is that right?
Well, so far I have not branded local cowboys, and I've dropped no one off at the train
No, no, no
station,
one's
which
at
is
the
a
train
metaphor
station.
for murdering them. So I have not done any of that yet. I have raised my family out on our homestead. So we've got some acreage, and I've got horses and cows and chickens and alpacas. And
How
we're
sustainable are you? Like how self-sufficient?
right now, my computer and light, because I'm at my home office right now, everything's running on solar this moment.
That's
So
awesome.
I'm off grid.
What's the
And
most challenging thing, which is really the root of my question? If you know, because I have an interest in going, it's harder for me in a suburban California town, but um, when I got out of the teams, active duty, I stayed in the reserves, but active duty, I bought 40 acres out near Telluride, Colorado.
yeah,
And I always had a vision of doing something like what you're doing. I ended up selling that property, but now I'm like, okay, it's time for me to go back and do
I,
that.
I think
You know,
it's time, brother.
it's
I think you
time,
should
right?
do it. You should
No,
do
I
it.
need to get in touch with you and
It is
get some
time,
advice.
bro. Well, so, of like it's a better life, in our opinion. It's a
Mhm,
better life where my kids are, growing up in the woods again,
mhm,
and we read all the time. I read to my boys at night, and their creativity is launching on, and they've got chores, so they've got jobs. If they don't take care of the chickens and the Great Pyrenees dogs that protect them, if they don't take care of them, those animals will die. We've told them of like, boys, they're
mhm,
9 and 10. If you don't take care of those animals, they will not eat. They will die. We will let
mhm,
them die. Now go take care of your animals.
mhm.
So
You live
they're
in a
growing
bus
up.
like Mr. Wonderful and teach them, how to stalk and hunt. Do you ever see that movie, Mr. Wonderful or Mr.
No,
Fantastic? Mr.
uh-uh.
Fantastic. You got to watch that.
Okay.
It's
Uh,
absolutely great.
okay. Yeah. So,
This guy
yeah. So,
bro, he's alone because his
no, no,
different
I
story.
did,
His
I did see that. It was
yeah his
Aragorn, a son of Arathorn.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
He's, yeah,
That's the
yeah, he
guy.
was,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, he was the guy.
You,
Man, I was wondering if like I liked a lot of elements about that, but that was an savage attack on Christianity. They really hated. I wasn't ready for that. I'm like, hey, just play in the woods and whatever. But they're like good with Maoism, but they're like anything but Christian. And all the kids are like, "Oh,
I
be
know.
terrible." I'm like, what the hell's that
But
about?
doesn't the boy become a staunch Christian at the end? I can't remember.
No, he's a Maoist,
Oh,
as in
really?
Mao Zedong.
Oh, that
I'm
is
like the guy
strange.
who murdered 60 million people, and they passed this off as a good plausible philosophy. And
Oh,
so
yeah. No,
anyway,
that's crazy. Okay.
there's some crazy communistic veins of hippieism that went into that movie that I really
Yep.
didn't like, but I really liked the movie. Other than that, it was
Other than
really
that,
really fun.
yeah. Well, we
It's
got a
just
lot of those veins in our culture
we
too,
do,
right? Being expressed through very kind of weird totalitarianistic tendencies.
yeah,
All the stuff
yeah.
that we saw in the last couple of years. So, which is why you say it's a good time to get a
Well,
property, and
well,
hunker
we're
down.
eating healthier too. Of like of we have cows, and so when we eat hamburgers and steaks all the time, and I know where the meat came from,
Right. Mhm.
and so of like we grow our own food. There's no pesticide. There's no hormones in our stuff anymore.
Mhm.
We've got our own water. No one's pumping crazy stuff into our water unbeknownst to us, and so we're healthier. We're outside. Our home isn't filled with screens, and we don't
Mhm.
have bad influences. And our kids are part of a homeschool co-op, so
Mhm.
we're always hanging out with like-minded families, and we're in charge of their education. And so I like life this way.
Yeah.
Out. It feels wildly healthier in a
Yeah.
way that the rest of the world has no idea what in the world we're even doing. And so it's cool, man.
That is cool. I wish we could do that at scale. I don't know how to do that at scale. You know what I mean? That'd be
Yeah.
challenging.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Something to ponder. John, this has been a really, really fun conversation. Thanks so much for your time, and thanks for doing the work and writing this awesome book, Warrior Poet Way. So where do you like people to connect with you? What's your website or social media handles and stuff like that?
Sure. So the book is available any place where books are sold.
Mhm.
You have like the
I have the preprint
done one.
copy. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the actual one, which I got just a couple days ago, is a hardback. And
Nice.
so that's the one. So any place books are sold, if you guys want to connect with us, visit our website,
Mhm.
warriorpoetsociety.com.
Check.
And then just type in Warrior Poet on whatever social place that is censoring us so you can't find us. Anyway, YouTube, good luck. Maybe you'll find Warrior Poet Society on YouTube. We've got way over 1 million followers on it, but
That's awesome.
they're not. Big Tech hates us, man. They hate us.
Yeah. Well, we got to fix that.
Yeah, man.
All right, John. Um, Anything, final comments to the
No, it
tribe?
was it was a pleasure. I really appreciate you, your mission. I look forward to really leaning in more into what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're an awesome dude. You're a good
Well,
guy. You're
thank you.
doing a good thing. So thanks, man.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
likewise. Well, it's like a team of teams, right? This
Yeah,
is going to take a lot of us spreading the light.
that's
And
it,
so I
man. That's
appreciate
it.
what you're doing.
Thank you.
And let me know if I can help out with anything, and let's stay in touch, brother.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Hoo-yah.
Cheers.